Welcome to the Political Frontline. My special guest today is the President of the US-Ukraine Business Council, Morgan Williams. Morgan, welcome to the Political Frontline.
Thank you.
Let's start from the politics. Soros once said that Ukraine is more important to the EU than Greece. Do you agree with this statement?
I certainly do agree to that. Ukraine lays in a very important place. It's not a part of the European Union. Of course, most people want it to be a part, but Mr. Putin says no. So it's become a major focal point. It should already be a part of the European Union. And Greece, you know, they've got their problems and they're not going to leave the European Union. So as far as you're looking down the road, Ukraine is very important to the EU, and also Putin has launched his massive multi-pronged war against Europe and the United States, and the focal point right now is Ukraine. So we have to figure out how to offset Putin's hybrid war here, or it will expand into other places. He's already taken part of Georgia. He wants to take part of. He's taken part of Ukraine. Then he wants to move and just chip away at the European Union and eventually at the United States. So it makes Ukraine the #1 focal point for the European Union today.
And what's your opinion? Does the EU understand that or not?
The EU has mixed messages right now. Many of the large businesses in the EU have huge investments in Russia. They're concerned about those huge investments. The EU is, they've had all the problems of expansion and everything. They're kind of tired. How do we buy off Mr. Putin and forget about part of Ukraine? So we're very concerned that Mr. Putin's campaign to split Europe, pull off some of the countries and Greece, not to vote for sanctions, and Europeans' fatigue with this thing causes us a lot of very strong concern. The European Union should take the longer view. They should be very concerned about what Mr. Putin's doing here, because it's only one part of his larger strategy.
Do you agree with the statement that EU security depends on Ukraine's fate?
I do partially. It's not totally depends on Ukraine's fate, but this is where the major battle is being fought now, and Mr. Putin's fighting it not only with boots on the ground, he's fighting to destabilize the Ukrainian economy. He's trying to destabilize Ukrainian society. He's already obviously infiltrated the government. For years he's been helping the military be weak and ineffective, and he has a massive propaganda campaign to convince people around the world that Ukraine is a bad place, it's run by bad people, and he should take it over.
Full of Nazi and so on.
Oh yeah.
Yes. What could the government do just to attract more investment in short term?
Well, for the investor, they look at 4 things about Ukraine. They look at the macroeconomic risk, and it's getting better, as you know, with the IMF program, with other donations, and with some stability in the National Bank, and now with Natalie Jaradsko as Minister of Finance. The macro situation is getting better. You got to solve the national debt restructuring problem, but from a business point of view, the risk of macro instability is being reduced. Secondly, there's the risk of reforms and corruption. The risk that it won't actually be massive, that there will not be massive reduction of corruption. So that risk, getting a little better, but not near fast enough from the investor business point of view. And then there's the risk of commercial risk. Most all of them are taking commercial risk, but now they can't get financing. And then there's what we call the political risk, which is basically Putin risk. And when you throw that in, that he's trying to destroy Ukraine militarily, economically, every other way, it's a pretty risky situation yet for business in terms of moving to the future. Not staying here, but expanding.
As you have mentioned about the reforms, what's your impression about Ukraine reforms?
The business community feels like they've been slow. They have not been as massive or as effective as possible, and they're very hopeful that the implementation of the reforms, the effectiveness of the reforms, move much quicker and deeper in the next months of this year, and there'll be many more privatizations. There's not many privatizations in energy. Many of these state agencies have many businesses that they don't need. Corruption still seems to be pretty massive.
Do you have your own recipe how to kill corruption in Ukraine society?
Well, the major way to kill corruption is to have more political will at the top, to make sure all those people, the top 100 people around the top government officials, are all checked constantly, because that's where a lot of the corruption can happen. Then you also need to deregulate and reorganize the government, because as you deregulate and organize the government, there's less places where people can exert a bribe or be corrupt. And of course the massive big schemes, they need to use the prosecutor general, they need to use the SBU, they need to use the FBI, they need to use the full force of the international legal and police community to stop those massive forms of corruption.
What's, on your opinion, which spheres must be reformed immediately? I mean, national security, maybe economy, maybe energy.
We'd say the #1 area is energy, because that's where much of the massive corruption, not the everyday corruption, the real massive corruption has taken place. It's not just been the money they've stolen. They've stopped putting in modern procedures. They've stopped improving the gas lines. They've stopped privatization. So the corruption means that Ukraine is almost where it was 20 years ago in terms of energy independence, because those who get into those schemes, they don't want transparency, they don't want new investment, they don't want, where's Chevron? Chevron has probably going to leave Ukraine. Where's ExxonMobil? They can't drill now.
They also leave Ukraine.
And they're probably leaving Ukraine. So there's really still, Shell has their area, but now it's got some problems. If I was the president and prime minister of Ukraine, I would have 10 of my best and brightest people. Their job was find a good energy project for Chevron. There's hundreds of good energy projects in Ukraine. Find one for Chevron, find one for ExxonMobil, find one for Shell, find one for Marathon, find a good program for all the major companies and get them in here, instead of basically once again running them all out of here.
If you were president of Ukraine, what would you change? For example, in national security.
If I was president of Ukraine, one, I'd use my bully pulpit, as we say, to talk more about what's being done, to talk more about selling Ukraine, talk more about transparency, and get up and talk about some of the success stories. To me,
you mean success stories of the companies?
Of the companies and the government. I don't think he's using his powers as much as he could as a public spokesman, as an advertiser for Ukraine. Secondly, I would think he would want to make sure that in a transparent way he shows that he and all of those people around him are not participating in corruption schemes.
As you may be, I think everybody knows that EU, US and other countries has imposed sanctions against Russia. Are these sanctions really effective?
The sanctions that have been imposed have some effect. They could have imposed more sanctions, but they've been hesitant to, it's been slow, step by step by step. I think a massive implementation of more of those faster would have had more impact. But the problem is they're having an impact upon the average Russian, they're having an impact upon the economy. But Mr. Putin, they say he's the wealthiest man in the world. They say he controls the entire Russian economy. far as I'm concerned, he couldn't care less about sanctions. That's not his goal. His goal is to build an empire. His goal is to chip away at Ukraine, is destabilize Europe. So he has a different goal, and we all know the Russian people are willing to suffer more to achieve those goals than the European people are, or the people of the United States. We all say, let's get tired, let's figure out how to compromise with Putin and go on down the road. That's a problem.
But I think President Putin has his own pool of oligarchs, and they suffered from sanctions.
Yes, but I don't think that's his major concern or his major objective. He thinks they're there to work for him. They should follow his lead of this massive hybrid war that he's involved in, and many times he seems to be involved in most all the other types of these crises around the world. He likes everybody that doesn't like the United States or Europe. They're his friend.
As you know, Ukraine economy has dark days. What's your perspective for Ukrainian economy for this year?
The Ukrainian economy for this
year,
I
decrease or rise?
I think it will continue to stabilize. We're very pleased about the international business community. They've stayed here. They've helped their employees. They lost sales. They want to continue here, and they've positioned themselves to be able to survive in a very tough market. So I think they're going to stay here. They're going to survive. They all have expansion plans. One, we've got to get the debt restructured. We've got to move reforms forward. We need to get the international community back in here with loans and financing, and hopefully slow down Mr. Putin. And the business community would move rapidly if we can reduce some of these risk variables to improve the opportunity.
This week, Iatsyshyn from the Atlantic Council told the US Senate that the West's current strategy toward Russia President Vladimir Putin aggression in Ukraine not only promises continuing conflict in Ukraine, but also poses an increased danger of wider war. Do you agree with this statement?
I would agree totally with that statement, and many in the business community also agree with that statement, because that goes along with what I said. Mr. Putin has a much larger, broader strategy than just Ukraine. This is only one small part of his larger strategy.
Ukraine just like a playing card.
That's correct. It's just one part of his longer run strategy, just happens to be where the major conflict is. And if Europe and the United States, neither one of them who are very good at playing these hybrid wars, we can't just lie about everything. We can't just, he's one man, the wealthiest guy in the world, he's totally in control of everything. Europe doesn't work that way. US doesn't work that way. So as a pawn strategist, he's very powerful and very effective in using economic power, political power, boots on the ground, all of the power structures that he has, much better than past leaders of the Soviet Union, frankly. He's probably the best, smartest, most capable of implementing his strategy of any leader Russia's had, because he knows how to use all of his strategic centers against Ukraine, Europe, and the United States.
The celebration, the day of the victory, the 9th of May, what behavior of the heads of the foreign states about this day? I mean, should they visit Moscow on this day or not?
As far as my opinion is, that was an important day. The Nazi forces were defeated, and it took the Soviet Union, England, United States, it took lots of different countries to defeat the Nazis, the Italians, and the Japanese. So it was kind of a, it's the greatest generation. So those people who fought the Soviet Union side to do their job, that they should be honored. All the rest of them should also be honored, because it was a massive group effort, not kind of like the Soviet Union propaganda almost like we did it by ourselves. They didn't do it by themselves. And then secondly, you have to look at today. I don't want that day to be used as a Russian propaganda event.
He wants to use it.
And also we have many of my friends who I think were amazing people. They didn't just fight against Nazis, they fought also against the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. So far as we're concerned, you had two evil forces, the Nazis and the Soviet Union, and there were those who said, that's not freedom for us to get rid of Hitler. We need to get rid of Hitler and Stalin. So, number one, let's honor what they did on all sides. But let's not make it a propaganda tool today for the Russians or anybody else. War is hell. Millions of people died. We honor that, not use it as a propaganda machine today to take credit for what we didn't really do and to say the world, it was a victory for everybody. It was not a victory for everybody.
And Putin wants to monopolize this victory.
And if I was a Western leader and I felt I was being used by Putin to promote his goals and objectives and to overstate what they did, I would not go.
I think the same actions will do the Western leaders. Now we'll have a short break and then we will continue. My special guest today is the president of the US-Ukraine Business Council, Morgan Williams. Morgan, continue. What about IMF and the Central Bank and the EBRD? Could they work with Ukraine more closely?
Well, it's a good question because, again, pushing Ukraine into the future, making Ukraine what we want it to be, there's two major sides to that. There's the public sector side, the government, the reforms, anti-corruption, macroeconomic stability. But just as important is the improvement of the business climate and more private investment, who creates jobs, who pays taxes, who makes things real happen. That's the side that in many ways I'm most concerned about. And to do that, we need all of the international financial institutions, EBRD, IFC, the US ones and others, to come in here with special programs to help jumpstart the financial support for Ukraine. The National Bank is much better than it used to be. And the
Ukraine National Bank.
Ukraine National Bank, but they could be more pro-business. They have a lot of restrictions in the National Bank of Ukraine that are not necessary, which restrict the flow of cash, restrict registrations, restrict recovery of assets, all kinds of things. So it's going to take a massive effort of the private business community, the international financial community. The Exim Bank of Ukraine needs to be completely restructured. It could be 100 times more effective than it is. We've got to, and the National Bank has got to get the banking system in Ukraine under control. So there's 50 or 75 major parts that have to come together before the business community is going to get gross national product going back in the right direction, start creating thousands of jobs, building more new factories, building new warehouses, bringing in inventory, paying taxes, and do what it takes to get Ukraine moving forward from the business economic sense, which is the other half of the coin.
What's your opinion about the Crimea? Maybe sometimes the Ukrainian government also will short the video and call it Crimea, the way to home.
Well, I think the United States is saying that Crimea is still a part of Ukraine. The Ukraine government is saying that it's still important and it's a part of Ukraine. But realistically, there are some other battles right now that I think are more important. It's not. I saw some flyers the other day that said Crimea is still part of Ukraine as a part of a massive campaign. I wouldn't think that's the major focus right now. I would think the major focus is on what is really Ukraine today and how to move that forward and how to sell the new government, how to sell the younger generation and empower them. Crimea is an issue for, in my opinion, there's other things that have to be resolved before you're going to be able to take on. And Crimea is a huge asset. Putin knew what he was doing. It's a major place for military. It's a major place for tourism. It's a major place for which you drill in the Black Sea. Crimea can be made into one of the major economic and military points of the world with the right money, which Putin probably will put in there in the long run. But right now, you've got all this Eastern Front, you've got the financial stability of Ukraine, you've got all these other major battles that Ukraine has to face before they can realistically do much about what happened in Crimea.
Ukraine people full of hope for European integration and for European dream, but EU giving not any chance. What's the reason?
Well, in my opinion, most of it's in Europe. Europe should have done much more to bring Ukraine into the European Union before now. They should have given them a roadmap. They ought to be doing much more to support Ukraine. I think it's an integral part of their future. They need a larger market. They have to, in the long run, it's India, China, Russia, EU,
Africa.
United States. EU needs to be stronger. They need Ukraine. They need Ukraine's resources, and they need another buffer between them and Russia. So I think for every reason you can think of, the EU should be doing a lot more to pull Ukraine into European Union. And we were very concerned when they kind of started backing off, when Putin said, do not touch Ukraine for the European Union, do not let Ukraine become a part of NATO. I will shut off gas to Germany and France. You know, he made all, do not, Moldova, don't even think about going into NATO. Finland, don't even think about, I mean, he's been laying out his plan now for 15 years. And he's pretty much told everybody what he's going to do. And to me, the European Union backed down too much. They backed off. They ought to have been much more aggressive. And right now, there's a lot of fatigue in the European Union saying, do we really want to fight this thing? Or do we kind of come to some kind of a compromise and hope Putin will go away? I don't think that's a good strategy. I think Putin wins.
He will, but I think he will lose in any case, sooner or later.
I'm sorry, you think what?
I think that Putin will lose sooner or later this battle between EU and Russia, or between Ukraine and Russia.
Well, I'm not sure. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we are very concerned that our number one goal is the future of Ukraine, the political stability, the macroeconomic stability, and particularly the stability and growth of the business community. So if we are most focused on Ukraine and its ability to survive in this region, then the Putin risk is really bad. We need more support from Europe. We need some more support from the United States. And again, so many places are saying, we have our programs of support on hold until Ukraine does more. And so, to me, Ukraine government could do more, and they could do more in terms of telling people what they're doing, because everybody says, oh, let's wait till Ukraine makes the first move. Let's wait till they get more reforms. Let's wait till they reduce corruption. Let's wait till they privatize the energy. Let's wait until they get their macro, because we're tired, we're fatigued. We've done so much for Ukraine, and not very much has been effective. So Ukraine has got to take the responsibility for its own future, but they can't do it by themselves. Everybody else has got to stay involved.
Morgan, on that bombshell, President of the US-Ukraine Business Council, Morgan Williams, thanks for being on Political Frontline.
Thank you very much.